And joining me now is Manipur's prominent human rights activist who heads the Human Rights Alert, Imphal-based organization, Babloo Loitongbam. Appreciate your joining us on the show. Mr. Loitongbam, I want to start by asking you, the Prime Minister a couple of days ago in his Independence Day address suggested that there are reports of peace and Manipur is slowly but surely returning to peace. Do you go along with that the worst is over and we now are seeing signs of peace, or do you believe that the ethnic divide is still very sharp between Kuki and Meitei groups, that is complete despite the fact that there has been no major violence reported in recent days?
Well, I think the tension in the peripheral areas are still very high. I think it cannot be said we have come back to normalcy as of yet. I do hope that what the Prime Minister is saying is true, but unfortunately the ground reality is quite different. The divide between the people are still very much there. The buffer zones are still maintained. And we still have more than 60,000 people in the IDP camps. So we can't call it a normalcy returning unless and until people can move from the valley to the hill and from hill to the valley, and some kind of restitution of the life of these people whose life are completely destroyed is put into place. So I think peace is still a far cry in Manipur, and we need concerted effort to make it happen.
So what you are telling me is that it is still very, very difficult, if not impossible, for someone from the valley to move to the hills, a Meitei from the valley to move to the hills, and a Kuki from the hills to come into Imphal. In that sense, the geographical separateness is still almost complete. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
So what is the solution then that you see? What is the solution that you see which actually can bridge divides? The Kuki groups who have assembled, many of them in Delhi, are once again calling for a separate administration and the removal of the Chief Minister Biren Singh. Do you believe that is a precondition, the removal of the Chief Minister, to possibly some kind of genuine reconciliation?
I think, Rajdeep, we have to, first of all, it is the silencing of the gun in the periphery. And secondly, providing some platform where people can dialogue, speak to each other. Unless and until these two fundamental things happen, we cannot say we have made any significant move. Again, the hurdle is that the Kuki groups are quite adamant that so long as Biren Singh is there, they are not going to involve in talk. There was already a peace committee officially created, as you remember, consisting about 51 people, but it was a stillborn. It never could have a sitting. So now I think what we need is either the Kuki agree to meet with Biren Singh, or Biren Singh is replaced by a fresh person, which could very well be from BJP, when one is not talking about the president's rule, but there has to be a new face on the Manipur government side. If otherwise, without a dialogue process, without sitting together and trying to thrash out, I mean, whatever political arrangement that has to be made out by sitting across the table. And how do you set the table? Who are around the table, I think, is the critical question that is there. And I think either the Kuki agree to sit with the Biren, or someone else rather than Biren has to be there. Otherwise, this will be a non-starter.
Because there are reports that the government is engaging already in back channel talks with Kuki groups. Some of them did come to Delhi, met Home Ministry officials. Are you saying that those talks cannot really go forward unless the Chief Minister is replaced? Is that what you are suggesting, that it is not possible to see a genuine dialogue without the Chief Minister being replaced?
Well, I do not want to be too jump to that conclusion, but no matter what is the debate and the discussion and the back channel communication that is happening in Delhi, ultimately the peace has to be built in Manipur, and it has to be the Meitei and the Kuki community who are fighting now on the front line that needs calming effect. If Delhi can play the interlocutor between the two, very good. But simply speaking to Delhi is not going to solve the problem. I think it has to be the Manipur government have to be involved, and the Manipur civil society, the groups who are right now at the forefront, has to be are the primary stakeholders. So it's very good, I mean, that there is dialogue happening in Delhi, but it should result in speaking to the stakeholders on the ground. Otherwise, peace cannot be just imposed, from Delhi.
You mentioned silencing of the guns. Just the fact that there are so many guns out there, there are those who are blaming Kuki militant organizations for it. Others are looking at the role of radical Meitei groups like the Meitei Lipun and the Arambol Tengnoupal. Others are looking at the role of the Manipur police and saying the police has played a highly partisan role. What's your sense when you say silencing of the gun? Whose gun? I mean, when you have conflicting groups playing very different roles, how is that going to be achieved?
Rajdeep, I mean, all the guns which are smoking at the moment has to be silenced if we have to move forward for a peace process. There are multiple actors, as you have rightly pointed out, but any negotiation can happen when there is a certain level of calmness. When people are going and killing people who are sleeping in their houses, as happened in Kwakta a couple of days back, I mean, no matter what dialogue happens, it will always fall. I mean, it will always collapse. I mean, dialogues will collapse so long as smoking guns are there in the field. So I mean, all the stakeholders who are now indulging in violence have to find a way to at least have a ceasefire and then have serious, sensible dialogue where you listen to each other, try to get the sense from each other, and you try to find and work out. That process have to be worked out. Otherwise, the stalemate will continue.
The scale of the human rights violations, how do you see the FIRs that have been filed of gang rapes, of torture, of killings? In most cases, there's a sense that justice is not being done because those involved have not been arrested, are not being prosecuted. FIRs have often been filed against unknown persons. It required a viral video in a particular case of women being stripped naked and paraded before arrests were made. Do you believe that is also an important precondition? Justice, a sense that the government is acting in a non-partisan manner and not a biased manner against one community.
Absolutely, I completely agree. The problem is, as was pointed out by the Chief Justice himself, that there is complete breakdown of the constitutional order in Manipur today. The institutions are not functioning the way it ought to function in a democratic country. So I think we have stooped down so low now in terms of brutalizing the other and dehumanizing the other. I think we have reached the rock bottom. We can only, I think, ascend from this. So it is important that violence is reduced and accountability is established. At the moment, we are trying to document as much as possible what is happening, but the institutions which are supposed to do this, I think the question of investigating all this huge number of FIR is still at large. So I think we need some very massive effort. I mean, business as usual is not going to address the need of in the ground. There are, I mean, 60,000 at least people whose house are burned down and they are living in IDP camps. So simply registering an FIR is not enough. It has to be followed by proper investigation, assessing how much loss each one has suffered. And it's going to take a long time to actually restitute the lives which were destroyed in this mindless violence.
Babloo, in that sense, do you think that the actual suffering is much more? We've heard more than 150 people officially dead. There are gang rape cases that have been reported. As you said, thousands rendered homeless. Is it actually much worse? Could it actually be much worse than what it is as you're slowly documenting these cases?
Absolutely, Rajdeep. At least the number of killing, I think, is much higher than this, some 150, which are cases of bodies which are found in the hospital. But I am also hearing from various sources that there are places where the rotting smell of bodies are coming out so badly that people cannot go there. And many of the dead bodies never reach the hospital. And therefore, once the dust settles down, I think the real nature of the violence and the real nature of this carnage is going to come out slowly. But at this point in time, as we still have smoking guns, so there's no way in which we can do a very honest assessment of it. I think the violence have to be brought down first.
The separate administration demand, which was again reiterated by Kuki groups, do you believe that is the only solution, or do you believe that is only the extreme solution if nothing else works?
Well, it is a demand at the moment. I think that demand is something that needs to be thrashed out. But as you also know, there is an equally vigorous kind of a resistance from the Meitei community, and to a certain extent from, other smaller communities as well, that Manipur's territorial integrity is paramount, and therefore it cannot be compromised. But at this point in time, rather than prescribing a solution, I think it is much more wiser for us to think of a process where these things can be engaged. But if we keep on kind of pressing for this maximalist position, it will only flare up more and more violence. I think we need a much more calmer environment where all these things can be processed. Identifying, a typical way of resolving problem is we start with position, but we dig and try to find out what are the real interests, and then get down to what are the most, uncompromisable need that people are demanding. So I think a process has to be worked out where we can identify the need. It is when we start appreciating this core need from both sides that we will be able to work out, negotiate in terms of interests. At this point, the positions are positions. Many people start with positions, but very often, conflict resolution is about, creatively trying to find out where we can balance your interests and my interests, and where do we settle. I think, at the personal level, I think the idea of Manipur, breaking the idea of Manipur will also be very, very costly, and we have to try and find out something. Maybe at this point in time, our Kuki brothers are very deeply hurt by this horrendous violence that they have suffered. So probably, also the Meiteis probably are feeling very deeply hurt by, the feeling that they are being, the Rubicon have been crossed. So in this very traumatized environment, we cannot work out a solution. I think we need to calm down first and try to empathize with each other's position, where it is coming from, what is making them speak what they are speaking today. If we, that kind of a deeper understanding is required before we prescribe. And if we are just going to fight on this position, we may continue this fight forever without coming to any, reasonable solution. So at this point in time, I would very strongly suggest calming down, bringing down the level of violence, and develop a process by which we can try and evolve what are the solutions that can come, rather than jumping into solution at this point in time.
One final question. We've had a no confidence motion which centered around Manipur inside Parliament. We've had the Prime Minister refer to it in his Independence Day speech. The Home Minister referred to it in his Parliament speech. And there's been a general sense that Manipur is firmly on the national map. The opposition wants to make it part of their agenda. Do you have hope, or do you believe that the politicians have much to answer for, that they are the ones who have been accountable, particularly the ruling party, both in Manipur and in Delhi? Do you hold out hope? What is your message to the politicians and the people of India?
Rajdeep, the only positive thing about this whole ruckus, political ruckus, is that perhaps in the streets of Delhi, people will not ask, where is Manipur? People have started hearing Manipur so often. The usual question that Manipuris face in the streets in Delhi or Bombay or cosmopolitan, perhaps that will not be asked. But in terms of the real content of the debate, to be very honest, Rajdeep, I'm very, very disappointed. I think this was used more as a political plank for them to prepare for the 2024 election than to address the Manipur issue in any genuine sense. I think the Honorable Prime Minister, of course, hardly mentioned anything of substance, but what the Honorable Home Minister was also trying to convince, I think there are lots of mistakes and half-truths. Trying to put the whole blame to illegal immigration from Myanmar as the source of the problem, I think, is slightly misplaced. None of the MPs from Manipur could even speak. I mean, some of them have come out in the public, but even privately, many people are saying they could not speak. I mean, and the Mizoram MP was saying that his mic was kind of switched off. I mean, I don't know the quality of democracy. If MPs cannot speak in the parliament, how are people in the street going to express their opinion and participate in the democratic process of India? I mean, we are yet to see what is going to follow concretely on the ground, but the debate per se was very disappointing.
So what you are saying is, don't just have, don't just blame illegal immigrants from so-called illegal immigrants from Myanmar or the drug lobby for what has happened. This is a complex issue. It is, blaming only one side will be unfortunate. Trying to target the Kukis as narco-terrorists, as some within the government have done, all of that you're saying is not the answer. The answer lies in first building bridges on the ground.
Plus, again, narco-terrorism is not just a Kuki phenomena. It involves people of all ethnic communities, and particularly those people on the top. So narco-terrorism has to be fought. I think the big elephant in this crisis is this narco economy, which IB has estimated as more than 40,000 crore per annum in a context of where Manipur has an official budget of 37,000 crore. The economy is much bigger. And the forthcoming election and how people are trying to grab this, black money, I think is at the heart of this problem that we are facing in Manipur. So in all its complexity, and it has to be understood. It cannot be just conveniently scapegoating it to some desperately helpless people running for their life into our country for survival. I think that doesn't, that is just scapegoating, to be very honest.
Babloo, you joined us, you've spoken to us from your heart and given us a real sense of a civil society, human rights perspective to what's happened in Manipur. I appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.